Everyone starts their day differently, but at 78, you don't have many options left. I get up at 6 o'clock every morning, whether I want to or not. The old bones just refuse to lie down any longer. The first thing I do is look out the window at the east side of my lot, where Eleanor and I once planted apple trees. Now they are tall and sprawling. Unlike me, trees only grow with age. My name is Gideon Townsend. I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, in a house I built with my own hands 42 years ago. Most of the neighbors with whom we started out settling in the area have long since moved away or died. There are young families around me now who say a polite hello when they meet, but try not to linger to talk to the old man. Today is Saturday, which means it's a day to go to the farmer's market. It's only 3 blocks away, and this walk is one of the few pleasures left in my life. I put on my old flannel shirt, corduroy pants, and a baseball cap. Eleanor always said I looked like a stubborn boy in it. Maybe that's why I still wear it. Before I leave, I glance at my phone. No missed calls, no messages. My daughter Lindell hasn't called in 2 weeks. No surprise, though. Our last conversation, as usual, ended with her rebuking me. "You've always been too busy for me, Daddy," she said then. "Your precious company, your homes, your projects, all of that has always been more important than your family." I could argue that it was the precious company that allowed her to graduate from college debt-free, buy her first car, and get help with the down payment on her own home. But years have taught me that there are no winners in these arguments. Walking down Franklin Street, I wave at Paul Abbott, who is mowing his immaculate lawn. He must be about 65 years old, quite a boy by my standards. He's the only one of the neighbors who regularly stops by for a beer and to watch baseball. "What's up, Gideon?" he yells across the lawn. "Not dead yet," I reply with my standard joke, and we both laugh. The farmer's market is buzzing and bustling. I buy tomatoes from Hank, who's been growing them for 30 years. They cost twice as much as they do at the supermarket, but they have real flavor, not the watery plastic they sell in the stores. "How's Lindell?" Hank asks as I pick the 3 reddest fruits. "Fine," I answer. "Busy with work and the kids. Lies come out easy. No one wants to hear the truth that your only daughter thinks you're the source of all her problems and only visits you when she needs something." As I walk back home, I feel a slight pain in my left arm. It's nothing serious. It's just age. At least that's what I convince myself. This kind of pain has been happening more and more lately, but I'm too stubborn to go to the doctor. All doctors do is forbid everything that brings pleasure and prescribe pills that make me feel worse. My house greets me with silence. It's 2 stories with 4 bedrooms. Too big for a lonely old man, but I can't bring myself to sell it. Every beam, every nail in this house holds my memories. I remember calculating the load on the floors, how I laid out the fireplace from the stones Eleanor and I collected from the riverbank. I remember Lindell learning to walk by holding on to the very railings I'd carved from oak. After Eleanor died 8 years ago, Lindell insisted I sell the house and move into a boarding home for the elderly. "You need care, Dad. There will be people your age there," she said. But I knew she really just needed the money. Her husband Richard is a loser who jumps from one job to another, and my daughter has inherited my pride but not my business acumen. I throw the tomatoes on the kitchen table and go to my office, a small room in the back of the house where all my papers and tools are kept. It's also where my old drafting table is. Computers never became my friends, although I certainly had to use them in my last few years of work. On the wall hangs a picture of me, Eleanor, and 5-year-old Lindell in front of the newly built house. We are all smiling, and I think that was my daughter's last genuine smile to me. Already in high school, she began to distance herself, and by her 20s, she had turned her childhood disappointment into a full-blown resentment toward the world, and especially toward me. I was never a perfect father. The construction business was demanding, especially in the beginning when we were barely making ends meet. I missed a few school performances, a couple parent-teacher conferences, But I always provided for the family, always made sure Lindell had everything she needed, and more. Eleanor understood me. She knew that my job was not an escape from my family, but a way to provide for her future. Lindell only saw my absence at dinner. From the closet, I pull a folder with the will and other documents. After the last fight with my daughter, I made some changes. I haven't excluded her completely. She is my blood, after all, but I have secured most of the assets from her impractical husband. I set up a trust for my grandchildren, Oliver and Isabella. The money will go toward their education, not another of Richard's business ideas which, like all the previous ones, will surely fail. The house was another matter. After a few hints from Lindell about how nice it would be to sell that big old house and move somewhere smaller, read, give her the money from the sale, I decided to take precautions. Having worked in construction all my life, I knew a few tricks. Legally, the house was now protected from any attempt to sell without my express consent, even if Lindell had somehow gotten power of attorney. My old friend and attorney Terrence had helped with all the necessary paperwork. Returning to the kitchen, I feel the pain in my arm again, stronger this time. It's joined by a slight dizziness. I grab the door jamb to keep from falling. Maybe I should see a doctor after all. No, it's just fatigue. I need more rest. I make myself a simple lunch, a turkey sandwich and a fresh tomato. I eat alone at the big oak table that used to seat a family of 3 and friends on holidays. Now it's just me and my thoughts at it. After lunch I try to read, but the letters blur before my eyes. The TV offers only bad news or stupid shows. I turn it off and sit in silence, listening to the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece, a wedding gift from Eleanor's parents that has outlived them by many decades. The phone rings abruptly and unexpectedly. The name Lindell pops up on the screen. I hesitate a second before answering it. "Hi, Daddy," she says in that special tone of voice that comes out when she needs something. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I answer. "What's wrong? What makes you think something's wrong?" She tries to sound hurt, but it's not very convincing. "Can't I just call my dad?" "Of course you can, but you don't usually call." Pause. I hear her sigh softly. "Okay, Dad, I need to talk to you about the house. This is it." I knew this conversation would happen sooner or later. "What about the house?" I ask, even though I already know the answer. "It's too big for you. You're up there alone, climbing the stairs. It's dangerous at your age." "I'm 78, not 108. I can climb stairs no problem." "But think about the future, Dad. If you sell the house now, when the market's up, you can buy something smaller and still have money left over for..." "For what, Lindell?" I'm interrupting. "For your husband and his next brilliant idea. Richard's just trying to provide for his family." Her voice rises. "Unlike some, he's at least present in his children's lives. An old wound she never misses an opportunity to open." I take a deep breath. "Lindell, I'm not selling the house. It's my house. I built it, and I will live in it until I die. End of conversation." "You are so selfish. You always have been, and you always will be," she yells into the phone. "You only think about yourself. The headache is getting worse." The room begins to spin slightly. "I have to go," I say, sensing something is wrong. "Sure, walk away from the conversation like you always do," she continues, but her voice now sounds like it's coming from far away. I try to stand up, but my legs give out. My phone falls out of my hand. The last thing I hear is Lindell yelling into the phone, "Daddy? Daddy? Are you there?" Then darkness. Lying on the floor of my living room, I can't move. Half my body isn't listening, and one thought is bouncing around in my head. If I die now, Lindell will get the house, and I know exactly what she'll do with it. The first thing I realized upon regaining consciousness was the rhythmic beeping of medical equipment. The second was the smell of disinfectant. Hospitals smell the same everywhere. I was lying in a room with pale green walls, trying to remember how I got here. A young nurse noticed that I had opened my eyes and came over to the bed. "Mr. Townsend, you're awake. How do you feel?" I tried to answer, but I couldn't speak. All I could get out of my mouth was a mumbled mumble. Panic gripped me. I couldn't speak. "Don't worry," the nurse said, adjusting the pillow under my head. "It's normal after a stroke. Speech often recovers. Dr. Rivera will be here shortly to explain everything." Stroke. The word echoed in my head. I remembered talking to Lindell on the phone, remembered the sudden weakness and dizziness, then the emptiness. "Your neighbor found you," the nurse continued, as if reading my mind. "Mr. Abbott. He came by to see why you hadn't returned his lawnmower and saw you on the floor. You're a very lucky man. If he hadn't found you so quickly, the consequences could have been much worse." Paul, my good neighbor, always said I should carry that emergency call button for the elderly. Now, I have to admit he was right. "We contacted your daughter," the nurse added. "She said she'd be here as soon as she could." I closed my eyes. Lindell. Our last conversation had been another argument about the house. I wondered if she was relieved when she found out I was dying. Maybe she's already mentally rearranging the furniture or planning how she'll spend the money from the sale. Dr. Rivera turned out to be a short woman with short dark hair and a serious look. She examined me carefully, checked my pupil response, measured my blood pressure. "Mr. Townsend, you've had an ischemic stroke," she said. "That means the blood flow to a certain part of your brain was blocked. We performed thrombolysis, a procedure that helps dissolve the clot. You're lucky you got here in time." She spoke slowly and clearly, as if I was not only paralyzed but also demented. Well, maybe I was. "The right side of your body is temporarily paralyzed and you have aphasia, a speech impediment. But with proper rehabilitation, there's a good chance of a significant recovery." I tried to nod, but even that simple movement was difficult. "You need to rest. While you're in the hospital, we'll start your rehabilitation. Then you'll need to continue it as an outpatient." The doctor left, and I was alone with my thoughts and my half-paralyzed body. Through the window, I could see a slice of blue sky and the tops of trees. Spring was in full swing. April had always been Eleanor's favorite month. "April is when the earth wakes up," she would say, enthusiastically planning what she would plant in the garden. Eleanor. 8 years have passed and I still talk to her in my mind. What would she say now? Probably would scold me for ignoring the warning signs. She'd always been more attentive to health, hers and mine. "Gideon, if I hadn't made you go for checkups, you'd have killed yourself with your job a long time ago," she often said. And she was right. After she died, I saw a doctor exactly once, when a cold lingered for 3 weeks and I started coughing up blood. It turned out to be pneumonia. Even then, I only went to the doctor because Paul threatened to call an ambulance if I didn't do it myself. Time stretches differently in the hospital. Minutes stretch into hours. Hours compress into seconds. I would doze off, wake up to noises in the hallway, fall asleep again. Nurses came in, checking vitals, giving shots. Someone brought lunch, but I couldn't eat on my own, a humiliating experience being spoon-fed like a baby. Lindell showed up toward evening. I recognized her footsteps from down the hallway, quick, determined. She always walked like she was late for an important meeting. "Daddy," she exclaimed as she entered the room. "How are you feeling?" I tried to answer, but all I got out of my throat was a hoarse mumble. Frustration and anger overwhelmed me. A helpless old man who can't even speak. "The doctor said you need time to regain your speech," Lindell said, sitting down in the chair next to the bed. "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." Something about the way she said it made me wary. Lindell's concern usually meant she would make decisions without asking my opinion. "I talked to Dr. Rivera. She said you're going to need constant care after you're discharged. You can't go home alone." I watched her face. There was no real concern in her brown eyes, so similar to Eleanor's. There was businesslike concern and something else. Impatience. I think we should seriously consider a nursing home, she continued. You'll be taken care of by professionals, and you wouldn't have to worry about the house, the bills, the cooking. I tried to protest, but all I got was a mumble. Lindell patted my arm as if she were soothing a cranky child. I know you want to come home, Dad, but be realistic. You're 78. You've had a stroke. You can't live alone in a 2-story house. I closed my eyes. Anger throbbed in my temples. The old story Lindell trying to decide for me how I should live my life, and the house again. Always the damn house. I looked at some good places. She opened her purse and pulled out glossy brochures. This one's particularly good, Pine Hills. It even has a pool and a library. And it's not far from Richard and me, so we can visit you often. I could barely keep from snorting. They didn't visit me when I lived 15 minutes away. Why would they start now? Lindell went on and on about the benefits of nursing homes, but I stopped listening to her. My thoughts took me back in time to when I first noticed this trait in my daughter, the desire to control everything and everyone. She was 13. Eleanor and I were planning a family vacation, and I asked Lindell where she'd like to go. Lake Lure, she said without hesitation. But we'd been there last year, I objected. Why don't we try something new? How about the mountains? No, she said. The lake is better. I can water ski there. There's nothing to do in the mountains. Your mom loves the mountains, I reminded her, and you've never tried hiking or rock climbing. Maybe you'd like it. I won't, Lindell said stubbornly. I want to go to the lake. If we go to the mountains, I won't go at all. Eleanor tried to compromise, but Lindell was adamant. In the end, we went to the lake. Next year, too. It became a pattern. Lindell decided what she wanted and got her way at all costs. When she was 16, she announced she wanted a car. All my friends get cars for their 16th birthdays, she said. We can help you buy a used car if you get a summer job and save up half the cost, I suggested. That's not fair, she resented me. Why should I work when you have plenty of money? You're just greedy. It's not about money, Lindell, I explained. It's about responsibility. When you put your own money into the car, you'll appreciate it more. You just don't love me, she said, slamming the door to her room. In the end, Eleanor and I bought her a used Ford with no strings attached. 3 months later, Lindell crashed it trying to run a red light. Luckily, she wasn't hurt, but the car was beyond repair. Instead of learning her lesson, Lindell blamed the traffic authorities for the poor organization of the intersection. She didn't apologize or offer to somehow compensate for the loss. Instead, she started insinuating that she needed a new car. You spoiled her, Eleanor told me at the time. We both did. Maybe she was right. I tried so hard to give Lindell everything I didn't have as a child that I didn't notice how it turned her into a selfish person. My father was a plumber. My mother worked in a laundry. We lived modestly, but they taught me the value of hard work and hard-earned money. When I turned 12, my father started taking me to work with him. By the time I was 16, I could install a sink or fix a leaky pipe on my own. It was my father who inspired me to pursue a career in construction. Gideon, he used to say, it's always better to build something with your own hands than to just get paid to sit in an office. I went to a technical college, studied engineering. I worked on construction sites to pay for my studies. I met Eleanor in my 3rd year. She was studying accounting. We got married a year after graduation. The first few years were difficult. I worked for a small construction company, but I dreamed of having my own business. Eleanor supported me, even though it meant we had to tighten our belts even tighter. When Lindell was born, I was already 32. My company was just starting to get back on its feet. I was working 12 to 14 hours a day, often including weekends. Looking back now, I realize I missed too many important moments in my daughter's life. Her first steps, her first words, her first day of school, all of which I know only through Eleanor's stories and photographs. When the business finally stabilized, it was too late. Lindell had become a teenager, withdrawn and resentful. She didn't want to spend time with me, preferring the company of friends or tucked away on her phone. I tried to make things work. I suggested joint trips, tried to take an interest in her hobbies, but all my attempts were perceived as clumsy and insincere. "You think you can just buy my love?" she said one day when I offered to pay for a summer camp in the arts she was passionate about. "Where were you when I really needed a father?" It was painful but fair. I couldn't turn back time, couldn't go back and make different choices. I could only try to be a better father now. But Lindell wasn't interested in reconciliation. She preferred the role of victim, using her unhappy childhood as an excuse for any of her mistakes and failures. "If I had a normal father, I wouldn't have gotten involved with a guy like Justin," she declared after another failed college romance. When she met Richard, I immediately sensed something wrong. He was 8 years older than her, eloquent and persuasive, but he had the same greed in his eyes that I'd seen in so many failed entrepreneurs I'd encountered over the years. "He's using you," I warned Lindell after their third date. "You didn't even give him a chance," she shouted. "You just don't want me to be happy." Richard quickly realized that I had figured him out and did everything he could to turn Lindell against me even more. They were married 6 months after they met. I paid for the wedding, a lavish event that they insisted on having at the country club, even though I had suggested a more modest option. As I'd suspected, Richard was a master at spending other people's money. In the first 5 years of their marriage, I had already lost count of the brilliant business ideas in which he invested my money, from importing exotic fruits to investing in some dubious cryptocurrencies. The birth of our grandchildren, Oliver and Isabella, improved our relationship a bit. Lindell allowed me to see them, although each visit was accompanied by transparent hints of financial difficulties. When Eleanor became ill with cancer, I expected it would bring my daughter and me closer together, but Lindell rarely visited her mother in the hospital, always finding excuses: work, children, colds. After Eleanor's death, the pressure from Lindell and Richard intensified. They wanted me to sell the house, the business, everything I owned, and move into a nursing home. It would be best for everyone, they said. It was then that I decided to take precautions. I knew my daughter well enough to realize she wouldn't stop. Her feelings of resentment combined with Richard's greed were a dangerous combination. I sold the company to one of my long-term partners, but instead of putting the money into a regular account, I set up several trusts and investment portfolios. Some of the money went into a trust for my grandchildren, which they would only have access to when they reached the age of 25. The other part I invested so that I could earn a steady income without touching the principal. As for the house, here I was particularly resourceful. With the help of Terrence, my attorney and friend since college, I had the house registered as a historic property through the local Architectural Preservation Fund. This meant that the house could not be sold or substantially altered without the approval of the foundation's board, which of course included Terrence himself. In addition, I installed a state-of-the-art security system with motion-activated cameras that sent footage not only to my home server, but also to a secure cloud storage system to which only Terrence and I had access. Perhaps these measures seemed paranoid, but years in the construction business have taught me to anticipate problems before they arise. And in Lindell's case, I sensed she'd stop at nothing to get what she thought was rightfully hers. "Dad, are you listening to me?" Lindell's voice brought me back to the present. I opened my eyes. She was still sitting next to me, holding the nursing home brochures. "I know you can't talk right now, but nod if you understand me," she said. I nodded weakly. "Okay, I'll come by tomorrow and we'll continue to discuss options. In the meantime, get some rest." She got up, leaned over, and gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, a gesture that seemed more like an obligation than a show of affection. Then she left the room, her heels tapping on the linoleum again. I lay staring at the ceiling. Something about her behavior bothered me more than usual. She didn't ask about my health, didn't inquire about my prognosis for recovery. The entire conversation revolved around the house and moving into a nursing home. Suddenly, it hit me. Lindell didn't just want me to sell the house, she was already planning something, and my sudden incapacitation came in handy for her plans. I tried to reach for the nurse's call button, but my right hand still wouldn't listen. With my left, I awkwardly fumbled for the button and pressed it. A minute later, a nurse appeared. "What's wrong, Mr. Townsend? Are you in pain?" I shook my head and tried to say something. Nothing came out. "Do you need paper and pen?" she guessed. I nodded. She brought a notebook and a pen. With my left hand, clumsily, I scribbled, "Call Terrence Holt," and added a phone number. "Is this a relative of yours?" the nurse asked. I shook my head and wrote, "Lawyer." "Okay, I'll call him tomorrow morning," she said. I shook my head vigorously and wrote, "Now, urgent." The nurse looked puzzled but nodded. "Okay, I'll call now. But it's getting late, Mr. Townsend. I may have to leave a message." I nodded, feeling somewhat relieved. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Perhaps Lindell really is just concerned for my well-being. But my instinct, which had rarely failed me in all these years, was screaming danger. So I learned to trust my instinct. The third day in the hospital brought marked improvement. In the morning, I found I could move the fingers of my right hand. Not much, but it was progress. Speech, too, was gradually returning. Words came out garbled, slow, but I could say simple phrases. "Vos stasta novo ing is going well," I said with difficulty to the speech therapist, a young woman named Samantha who came twice a day for sessions. "That's great, Mr. Townsend," she smiled broadly. "You are progressing faster than many of my patients. Keep it up, and soon you'll be able to speak almost normally." Terrence arrived around noon, tall, lean, with silver hair and a straight back. He always looked like a man who could be trusted with the toughest cases. That's why he was such a successful lawyer. "Gideon, you old fox," he said, sitting down beside the bed. "What have you done this time?" "In-stroke," I squeezed out, trying to smile. "Yeah," the nurse said. "You scared me." His eyes behind his stylish, thin-rimmed glasses scrutinized my face. "She also said you insisted on calling me urgently. What happened?" "Lindell," I said. "Home." Terrence frowned. "You think she's up to something with your house?" I nodded. "She's been here. She was talking about the house of the elderly." Terrence pulled a notebook and a pen out of his briefcase. "Here, this will make it easier." I took the pen with my left hand and clumsily wrote, "Check the house. Cameras." Terrence nodded. "I'll do it. Do you want me to look at the security footage?" I nodded. "What about your files? Are they still in the safe in the office?" I nodded again and added, "The key is in the book, Moby Dick." Terrence grinned. "Classic place for a key. Don't worry, I'll check everything. If Lindell's up to something, we'll be ready." He stayed a little longer, talking about nothing. His new car, his grandson going off to college, how his wife had finally retired and was now pestering him about traveling. When he left, I was somewhat relieved. Terrence was not just my lawyer, but one of my few true friends. I knew he would take care of everything. After lunch, the physical therapist came in, an energetic, middle-aged woman who had me do a series of exercises to regain mobility. By evening, I was exhausted and dozed off right after dinner. I awoke to the ringing of my cell phone, which the nurse had left on the nightstand next to my bed. The name Lindell popped up on the screen. I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. "Daddy, is that you?" My daughter's voice sounded unusually excited. "Yes," I answered, trying to speak as clearly as possible. "Oh, you can talk already. That's wonderful." There was no sincere joy in her voice, only nervousness. "Daddy, I have amazing news. You're not going to believe this." I waited without interrupting her. "I'm getting married," she blurted out. "You're already married," I said slowly, feeling my bewilderment growing. No, I mean, yes, but Richard and I have decided to renew our vows, to have a second wedding, you know? And I thought, why not do it now while you're recovering? It'll give you extra motivation to get better. I didn't say anything. Lindell had always been a bad liar. When she was nervous, her voice would get higher and her speech would get faster. Now she was practically gibbering. And Daddy, I know you're going to be surprised, but I sold your house and your car. That's it. I expected something like that, but I still felt the blood rush to my face with anger. What? I blurted out. Yes, I know it's sudden, but understand, it's the best solution. The doctor said you can't live alone after a stroke. You need constant care, and Pine Hills is a great place. I showed you the brochure, remember? But there's a big down payment, and the monthly fee's a lot of money, too. She was talking fast, like she was afraid I'd interrupt her. So I decided to act quickly. The real estate market is booming, and your house is going for a great price. You won't believe it. $850,000. That's a lot more than we expected. And your old Cadillac was bought by a collector who paid $32,000. Can you believe that? I squeezed the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. You have no right. I struggled with each word, but I was determined to speak up. Dad, I know you're upset. Her voice became ingratiating. But this is really the best solution. The money will go to pay for your stay at Pine Hills, and the rest of the money will be kept in a special account for your extra expenses. Everything will be fine. You'll see. Lindell, I paused, gathering my strength. You've co-created a fatal accident. There was silence on the line. What do you mean? She finally asked, a defensive tone in her voice. You have no right to sell my house, I said slowly but firmly. It's not legal. Dad, don't be silly. I'm your daughter and your only relative. Who else is going to take care of you and your property when you're in this condition? A legal representative. Trust. You've got nothing. Again the pause, longer. Dad, listen. Her tone changed, almost threatening. The buyers have already put down a deposit. The contracts are signed. You can't just cancel the whole thing. I can, I said. And I will. You don't understand. She was almost screaming now. We've already spent some of the money. The down payment on Pine Hills has been made, and it's non-refundable. Your problems. I was beginning to feel tired, but I was determined to end this conversation. It's your problem too, Dad. If you cancel the sale, we'll have to sue the buyers. It'll cost you a lot of money and nerves. In your condition, it could lead to another stroke. Now she was trying to intimidate me. Typical Lindell tactic. If things don't go well, push guilt or fear. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. But there's one thing you didn't take into account. What do you mean? There was irritation in her voice. There are hidden cameras in my house, I said slowly. Everything you do is recorded. What? She almost shrieked. My AdCat's already filed a report with the police. Rana honesty. Wrongful sale of property. There was a deafening silence. I could almost see Lindell frantically pondering his situation, trying to find a way out. You're bluffing, she finally said, but her voice shook. There aren't any cameras in your house. There are, I answered confidently. In the anteroom, in the stateroom, in my office, and in the backyard. It was true. After a series of burglaries in our neighborhood a few years ago, I had installed a state-of-the-art security system. The cameras were small and discreet, but they recorded everything in high quality. The recordings were stored not only on the home server, but also in the cloud, which Terrence and I had access to. I don't believe it, Lindell said, but her voice sounded less confident. You've always been against this kind of thing, said it was an invasion of privacy. People change, I said, especially when they're stolen by their own children. I heard her draw in a sharp intake of air. I wasn't stealing from you. I was trying to help. You can't live alone after a stroke. It's dangerous. It's not up to you. Then who is? Who's going to take care of you? Who's gonna cook, clean, make sure you take your meds? I'll get help, I said. With my own money, not yours. Daddy, you don't understand. Her voice became pleading. We were doing it for your own good. We? I questioned. Is Rychard in on this too? Lindell was silent, and the pause was long enough for an answer. Sure, I continued. Whose idea was it? Yours or his? It doesn't matter, she mumbled. We're a family. We make decisions together. Family doesn't steal from each other. Dad, listen. Lindell started, but I interrupted her. No, you listen. I'm going to give you one chance. I'll give it back. I want my deposit back. Explain you made a mistake. That's impossible, she exclaimed. I told you we've already spent some of the money. On what? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Pause. For the down payment on Pine Hills. Lies, I said. For what, exactly? Another long pause. Richard had some debts, she finally said quietly. We used some of the money to pay them off, but it's only temporary. We'll pay it all back as soon as his new business starts turning a profit. I grinned bitterly. Another of Richard's brilliant business ideas. How many have there been already? 10, 15. All failed. What business this time? I asked, not hiding my sarcasm. Importing environmentally friendly building materials from Scandinavia, Lindell answered quickly. It's a growing market. Richard has already found suppliers and is negotiating with local developers. In a few months, we will triple the amount invested. It's the same old thing. Loud promises, minimal knowledge of the market, complete lack of experience in his chosen field. Classic Richard. How much did you take? I asked. What? How much money have you spent so far? Lindell hesitated. 100,000, she finally admitted. But we'll get it back. I swear, Daddy, $100,000. The money they stole from me by selling my house without my consent. My own daughter. You have 3 days, I said, my anger throbbing in my temples. Get the money back and cancel the sale, or I won't make a report to the police. You won't do that, her voice sounded less than confident. You wouldn't send your own daughter to prison. Check me. Dad, think of the grandchildren. What happens to Oliver and Isabella if their mother goes to prison? This is Lindell's last weapon. My grandchildren. The only people in this world besides Eleanor that I loved unconditionally. They'll be better off without a mother to teach them how to fight, I said, though my insides clenched at the thought of what it would do to the children. You monster, Lindell screamed. You always have been. All my life you've thought only of yourself, of your money, of your precious house. Never about me, never about our family. Old accusations, old grudges. I've heard them 1,000 times. 3 days, I repeated. After that, I'll talk to the lycée. Daddy, please. Her voice suddenly became pitiful. We can't get the money back so soon. Give us at least a month. 3 days, I was adamant. And no contact with the Cupa Patiles of the house. My Adwa cat's already in touch with them. It was a bluff. I didn't know if Terrence had already talked to the buyers, but Lindell didn't need to know that. That's impossible, she exclaimed again. Where are we going to get 100,000 in 3 days? Sell your house, I suggested, or Richard's car, the one I gave him for Christmas. You know we can't do that. We've got a mortgage, the kids go to private school. Not my problem. I could feel the fatigue coming in waves. The conversation was taking its toll. 3 days, Lindell. Don't call until you're ready to pay the money back. Dad, wait! She sounded desperate. Let's talk about this. There has to be some kind of compromise. Compromise was possible before you sold my house behind my back, I said. It's too late now. But I'm your daughter, she exclaimed. Your only daughter. Would you send me to prison for money? Not for money, I said, because of betrayal. With these words, I pressed the end button. The phone immediately rang again, but I didn't answer it. After the third ring, it went silent. I leaned back on the pillows, feeling a mixture of anger, frustration, and deep sadness. My own daughter, flesh and blood, the only living person linking me to Eleanor. What have I done wrong? Where did I go wrong in raising her? Did I really pay too little attention to her? Or on the contrary, too pampered, did not teach to appreciate what you have, did not show that in life you need to earn, not just take? The phone rang again. This time it was Terrence. "Gideon," he said without preamble. "I've been going over the security footage. Lindell did bring some people to the house, some potential buyers, and some man in a suit, maybe a realtor or a notary." "I know," I said. "She called it in. She sold the house for $850,000, and the car too." "God damn it," Terrence swore. "Without power of attorney? Without your consent? That's fraud." "Yeah. I gave her 3 days to get the money back and cancel the deal. Then we're going to the police." Terrence is quiet. "Are you sure you want to go down this road, Gideon? It's your daughter." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "She has to realize that actions have consequences." "Okay," Terrence sighed. "I'll contact the buyers of the house and explain the situation. They'll probably cancel the contract themselves when they find out that Lindell had no right to sell the property." "Thank you. What about the car?" "Same thing." "Got it. I'm on it. You rest up and get your strength back." We said goodbye, and I put my phone on the nightstand. Outside the window, dusk was falling. The day was coming to an end, one of the hardest days of my life. A nurse peeked into the room to give me my evening injection. "Is everything all right, Mr. Townsend?" she asked, noticing the look on my face. "You look upset." "See my family problems," I answered. She nodded understandingly. "The hardest. But you're recovering very well. Dr. Rivera says that if you keep this up, you should be discharged in a week." I nodded, wondering what was waiting for me at home. Or rather, was home waiting for me? Would Lindell keep his word and cancel the sale? Or would she decide she was bluffing as much as I was? Who would have thought that at 78 I would have to fight my own daughter for the right to live in a house I built myself? Life is full of irony. I closed my eyes, feeling the medication administered by the nurse begin to take effect, plunging me into a sleepy stupor. My last thought before falling asleep was of Eleanor. What would she say when she saw what our daughter had become? And what would she advise me to do? I didn't know the answer, but I was sure of one thing. I wouldn't let Lindell take away the last thing that connected me to the past, to the life we'd built with Eleanor, even if I had to send my own daughter to prison to do it. The next morning brought clarity to both my head and the weather. Sunlight streamed through the hospital room window, forming a golden rectangle on the floor. My speech continued to improve. Words still came out slower than usual, but without the painful pauses between syllables. My right hand was doing better too, though my fingers were still clumsy. At 10 o'clock in the morning, a nurse came into the room. "Mr. Townsend, you have visitors. 2 men, one of whom identified himself as your lawyer." "Send them in," I answered, rising up on the pillows. Terrence was the first to enter, impeccably dressed as always, carrying a dark leather briefcase. He was followed by a stranger, a stout man in his 40s in a dark blue suit. His wary gaze and straight posture made him look like a policeman, even without his uniform. "Gideon," Terrence shook my left hand. "This is Detective Harris from the Fraud Squad." The detective nodded and shook my hand as well. "Mr. Townsend, I'm glad to see you're feeling better. Mr. Holt told me about your situation. I need to ask you a few questions if you don't mind." "Sure." I pointed to the chairs by the bed. "Have a seat." They sat down next to each other, and the detective pulled out a small notebook. "Mr. Townsend, do you confirm that your daughter, Lindell Coleman, sold your house and car without your consent or knowledge?" "Yes," I answered firmly. "She called me yesterday and reported it to me as a fait accompli." "Did Miss Coleman have any legal rights to dispose of your property? Power of attorney, joint ownership, anything like that?" No, she did not. I never gave her power of attorney. The house and the car are registered in my name only. Harris made a note in his notebook. According to Mr. Holt, do you have video footage of Miss Coleman bringing potential buyers to your house? I looked at Terrence, and he nodded. Yes, I have a video surveillance system installed. Mr. Holt has reviewed the footage and can provide it to you. He already has, Terrence interjected. I sent the files to Detective Harris this morning. Harris nodded again. Mr. Townsend, do you know who bought your house? Do you have any information about the buyers? No, I shook my head. Lindell only said she sold the house for $850,000 and the car for $32,000. She didn't give any details about the buyers. I see, the detective made another note. And do you know where the money from the sale is now? I sighed. Lindell admitted that she and her husband had already spent $100,000 to pay off some of her husband's debts and finance his new business. The rest, I assume, is still in their possession. Harris raised his eyebrows. So not only did they illegally sell your property, but they've already spent some of the money? Exactly, I confirmed. The detective closed his notebook. Mr. Townsend, based on the information and video evidence provided, we have every reason to file criminal charges against your daughter for fraud and misappropriation of property. These are serious charges that could result in jail time. Are you sure you want to proceed? I felt a heaviness in my chest. It's one thing to threaten Lindell with the police, hoping she'll come to her senses. It's quite another to actually prosecute your own daughter. Mr. Holt said you gave Miss Coleman 3 days to return the money and cancel the transactions, Harris continued. Is that correct? Yes, I confirmed. Yesterday I told her that if she made things right within 3 days, I wouldn't go to the police. But, frankly, I don't believe she can do that. We've already contacted the buyers of the house, Terrence interjected. The Bennett family. They were shocked to learn that Lindell had no right to sell the house. They are ready to cancel the deal, but they want to return the deposit, $120,000. And the car? I asked. The buyer of the Cadillac is a collector from Raleigh. He's also willing to return the car, but he also wants his money back. I nodded. That made sense. But if Lindell and Richard had already spent $100,000, exactly. Terrence looked worried. They'd have to find that money somewhere to pay back the deposits. Detective Harris closed the notebook and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Mr. Townsend, I realize this is a delicate situation, given that we're talking about your daughter. So what I propose is this. We'll prepare everything to press charges, but we'll wait 3 days, as you and your daughter agreed. If by then she's returned the money and canceled the deals, you can decide not to press charges. If not, we'll proceed. Thank you. I was grateful for that approach. But I want you to know I'm serious about my intentions. If Lindell doesn't make things right, I'm prepared to go all the way. I understand. The detective nodded. We'll keep you informed. Feel better, Mr. Townsend. After the detective left, Terrence stayed behind. He looked concerned. Gideon, are you really ready to send Lindell to prison? I stared out the window for a long time before I answered. You know, Terrence, when Eleanor was dying, she made me promise. Take care of our little girl, she said. All these years I've tried to honor that promise. Gave Lindell money when she needed it. Helped with the down payment on their house. Paid for the grandchildren's private school. And what did I get in return? A daughter who waits for me to die so she can get her inheritance, and when I get sick, tries to steal everything I have. Terrence listened in silence. Maybe I was a bad father, I continued. Maybe I worked too much and didn't spend enough time with her as a child, but that doesn't excuse what she did. Sometimes I think the best thing I can do for her now is to show her that actions have consequences, even if those consequences are painful. I understand, Terrence said quietly. But prison, Gideon, it could ruin her life. And she didn't think about ruining my life? I objected. The house I built with my own hands, the memories of life with Eleanor, everything I had left. She was ready to take that away from me, and she didn't even think twice about it. Terrence sighed. I'm not arguing with you. I just want to make sure you know what you're doing. I do, I said firmly, and I'm still giving her a chance to make things right. If she finds a way to get the money back and cancel the deals, good. If not, let her take responsibility for her actions. Toward evening, Paul, my neighbor, visited me. He brought a fruit basket and told me that he'd seen things being taken out of my house, including an antique clock from the mantelpiece, a wedding gift from Eleanor's parents. I immediately called Terrence, who promised to check local pawn stores and antique stores. Later, Lindell called, her voice sounding panicked. Daddy, the police came to see us. They were asking questions about the house, about the sale. What's going on? I warned you, I replied calmly. If you don't cancel the deal and return the money, I'll go to the police. But they're already here, she exclaimed. They said they could press fraud charges against me. That's a felony, Daddy. Yes, fraud is a felony, I agreed. And that's exactly what you committed. She started threatening, begging, accusing me of callousness, reminding me of my grandchildren. But I was adamant. You have 2 days to return the money and cancel the deals. Otherwise, there will be consequences. Richard called next, trying to find a compromise. He even offered to sell their house to give the money back to the buyers. But when I mentioned the items taken out of the house, especially the watch, he seemed genuinely surprised. I didn't know about that, he mumbled. Lindell said she was only going to take some pictures and personal items that belonged to her. The next morning, Terrence came in with news. He'd found my watch in an antique store. Lindell had sold it for $8,000. What's more, she'd withdrawn $200,000 from the joint account. Gideon, I don't want to alarm you, but there is a possibility that Lindell is planning to escape, Terrence said. That same day, Detective Harris said they launched a formal investigation. Lindell was fingerprinted, and photographs were taken for the police file. She was released on her own recognizance, but if she did not return the money and cancel the transactions within a specified time, she would be charged with fraud, theft, and misappropriation of property. That evening, Lindell arrived at the hospital, pale, with eyes reddened with tears. Daddy, you can't do this to me, she said, sitting down next to the bed. It would ruin my life. Think of the children. You should have thought of the children before you committed the crime, I replied. I didn't mean to hurt you, her voice shook. I don't know what came over me. Richard said this was a great opportunity, that we could finally get out of debt, that you couldn't live on your own after your stroke anyway. And you decided the best way out was to sell my house behind my back? I shook my head. Lindell, you could have just talked to me, asked for help. I would have listened. You never listen, she exclaimed. You always do things your own way, like you're doing now? I grinned bitterly. We looked at each other for a long time, two stubborn people, two Townsends, unable to give in. What do you want from me? She asked at last. I want you to return all the money, cancel the deals, and return all the things you took from the house, I answered, including the watch you sold. I can't, she whispered. The money. Most of it has already been spent or transferred to Richard's investments. And the watch. The store had already sold it to some collector. I closed my eyes, feeling everything inside clench with pain. The watch that meant so much to Eleanor and me was now in some stranger's possession. Then I can't help you, I said. Actions have consequences, Lindell. They always have. Are you really going to let your daughter be sent to prison? Her voice was barely audible. No, I answered, looking her straight in the eye. I'm not going to let you go to prison. You're sending yourself there by your actions and your refusal to undo what you've done. Lindell stood up, tears streaming down her cheeks. You never really loved me, she said. You always cared more about money, work, home, everything but me, Everything but me. That's not true, I said quietly. I loved you more than anything in the world. I still do. That's why I can't let you ruin my life thinking that you can steal and cheat with impunity. Goodbye, Daddy, she said, and walked out of the room without looking back. I knew I would probably never see her again, at least not on the outside. The thought tore at my heart, but I was determined to see it through. Sometimes love means allowing a person to face the consequences of their actions, even if those consequences are painful, especially if those consequences are painful. Friday, the day of my discharge from the hospital, came clear and warm. Dr. Rivera gave me one last checkup, nodding in satisfaction as I effortlessly raised my right arm and coherently answered all of her questions. Mr. Townsend, your recovery is progressing at an impressive pace, she said, making notes on my chart. However, there is still a lot of work to be done. You need to continue with speech therapy twice a week and physical therapy 3 times a week. And, as we discussed, you should not be alone anytime soon. I've hired a nurse, I replied. She'll come during the day, and my roommate Paul will stay with me at night, at least at first. Dr. Rivera nodded. Good. I'll write all the necessary prescriptions and referrals. I'll see you in 2 weeks for a checkup. Paul came to pick me up around noon. His old Ford stopped at the hospital entrance and he helped me into the passenger seat, putting my wheelchair in the trunk. The doctors insisted I use it for the first time, even though I could already walk short distances on my own. How does it feel to be back in the world of the living? Paul asked, pulling out of the hospital parking lot. It's weird, I admitted. It felt like months, not days. We drove through the familiar streets of Chapel Hill, past the university campus with its old buildings, past the coffee shops filled with students, past the park where Eleanor and I often walked on weekends. The town lived its normal life, unaware of the drama playing out in my family. Had you heard from Terrence? I asked, looking out the window. Paul hesitated to answer. Yes. He called this morning. He wanted to come to the hospital, but I told him I was on my way to pick you up. He'll be waiting for us at your house. There was something in his voice that made me uneasy. Is something wrong? I'd rather let Terrence tell me, Paul said evasively, and I decided not to insist. When we got to my house, Terrence's car was at the gate and a police car was parked next to it. My heart clenched. Something had obviously happened. Terrence and Detective Harris were waiting on the porch. Both had serious looks on their faces. Gideon, Terrence helped me out of the car and into the wheelchair. It's good to see you home. What happened? I didn't waste time with pleasantries. Terrence and the detective looked at each other. Let's go inside, Harris suggested. My house greeted me with silence and the faint smell of dust. Everything looked the same as the day the ambulance took me away. The same clutter on the coffee table, the same book, open in the middle, lying on the arm of the chair. Only there was no clock on the mantelpiece. Its absence was painfully jarring. We settled down in the living room. Paul made coffee for everyone, and I waited impatiently for an explanation. Gideon, Terrence finally began, we have a problem. Lindell's disappeared. What do you mean, disappeared? I felt a chill run down my spine. She didn't show up for her scheduled meeting at the police station yesterday, Detective Harris explained. We sent a patrol to her house, but no one was there. Neighbors said they saw her and her husband loading suitcases into the car 2 days ago. Said they were going to a relative's house for the weekend. Are the kids with them? I asked, thinking about the grandchildren. Yes, Harris nodded. We checked. The kids didn't show up for school on Thursday and Friday. We also found that Lindell closed all her bank accounts and withdrew all her money in cash, Terrence added, and sold her car through a free classifieds website. The buyer confirmed that he'd paid cash. I leaned back in my chair, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Lindell had escaped. With my money, with my grandchildren. Probably forever. We put out an APB on her, Detective Harris said. But if they've crossed state lines, or worse, country lines, they'll be harder to find. You think they might have left the country? I felt panic rising inside. It's possible, Harris admitted. We don't have records of airline tickets purchased in their names, but they could have used private carriers or crossed the border into Mexico by car. I closed my eyes, feeling a mixture of anger and deep sadness. Part of me wanted to scream with rage. The other part, the part that was still a father, was worried about Lindell and the grandchildren. What now? I asked, opening my eyes. We'll keep looking, Harris assured me. But I have to be honest, if they're well prepared to flee, finding them may be difficult. What about my house, my car? I remembered the immediate problem. The good news is that the deal on the house wasn't finalized, Terrence said. The buyers, the Bennett family, had agreed to drop their claim when they learned of the situation. They lost the deposit, but they realize it's not your fault. I want to meet with them, I said firmly. I want their money back. But Gideon, it's not your responsibility, Terrence objected. Lindell was supposed to return the deposit. I know she did, but she ran off with my money. The least I can do is compensate the innocent people affected by her actions. Terrence nodded, realizing it was useless to argue. Good. I'll make an appointment. And the Cadillac? I asked. That's a little more complicated, Terrence admitted. The buyer had already resold it to another collector in California. We could sue, but that would take time. I sighed. The car was dear to me, but that seemed like the least of my problems at the moment. Okay, we'll deal with that later. What about the stuff she took from the house? We were able to get the watch back, Terrence said, and his face broke into its first smile of the day. The antique store had agreed to buy it back from the collector he'd sold it to. I felt the tension release a little. Thank you, Terrence. That means a lot to me. After Detective Harris left, Terrence stayed behind to discuss next steps. We decided that he would begin the process of legally revoking all powers of attorney and documents that could give Lindell any rights to my estate in the future. And I think you should change your will, Terrence suggested, considering the circumstances. I nodded slowly. The thought of cutting Lindell out of the inheritance entirely was painful, but inevitable. Yes, you're right, but I want to leave something for my grandchildren. They're not to blame for their mother's actions. We could set up a trust fund for them, Terrence suggested, with the stipulation that they can only access the funds when they reach a certain age, and appoint an independent trustee unrelated to Lindell. Let's do that, I agreed. Paul, who had been sitting quietly in the corner the whole time, finally spoke. Gideon, I realize this isn't the best time, but I have to say something. You are not alone. You have friends who care about you. Me, Terrence, a lot of others. We're going to help you through this. I looked at the two men, my lawyer and my neighbor, who had become closer than my own daughter. The bitterness of loss mingled with a warm sense of gratitude. Thank you both. I don't know what I would have done without you. The next days were filled with medical procedures, visits to the speech and physical therapist, and conversations with lawyers and the police. My physical condition improved faster than the doctors had predicted, but my emotional wounds were slower to heal. Every evening I sat in my chair, looking at the clock back on the mantelpiece, and thought about Lyndall, about my grandchildren, about where they were now and whether I would ever see them again. The third day after I returned home, Terrence brought the Bennett family, a young couple with 2 young daughters. They looked a little tense entering my house, but I tried to create a relaxed atmosphere. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, I'm very sorry about what happened, I said as we settled into the living room. My daughter acted without my knowledge or consent. We understand, Mr. Townsend, replied James Bennett, a young man of about 35 with an open face. Detective Harris explained the situation to us. We're very sorry you're in this position. We just wanted a nice home for our girls, his wife Emily added, hugging their youngest daughter. We really liked your house, but we don't want any trouble. I looked at their children, A blonde-haired girl about 8 years old and a baby girl no older than 4. They reminded me of my grandchildren, and my heart clenched with pain. "I want to pay you back the deposit," I said, pulling out the checkbook I'd prepared in advance. $120,000. You don't have to suffer because of my daughter's actions." James looked surprised. "Mr. Townsend, you don't have to do this. Legally, it's your daughter's responsibility." "I know," I nodded, "but it's the right thing to do. And I'll feel better if I make up for what she's done." I wrote a check and handed it to James. He took it with obvious hesitation. "I don't know what to say, Mr. Townsend. That's very noble of you." "Tell me, are you still looking for a house?" I asked, suddenly struck with an idea. "Yes," Emily answered. "But there aren't many on the market in our price range right now." I exchanged glances with Terrence, and he nodded faintly, understanding my train of thought. "What if—" I paused, thinking about what I was saying. "What if I sold you the house? For a fair price, with all the legal formalities?" The Bennetts looked stunned. "But, we thought you didn't want to sell the house," James said. "I didn't want to when Lindell tried to make me," I admitted. "But now that I look at your family, this house is too big for a lonely old man. There should be children here, laughter, life, like when Eleanor was alive and Lyndall was little." "Are you sure?" Emily asked, but there was hope in her eyes. "I'm sure," I nodded. "Of course, it'll take me a while to find a new place to live and pack, but if you're willing to wait a couple months, the house is yours." James and Emily looked at each other, silently consulting each other. "We'd be delighted, Mr. Townsend," James said at last, "but only if you really want us to." "I do," I said, and for the first time in a long time I felt like I was making the right decision. Terrence would help with the paperwork, and this time it would be legal. After the Bennetts left, Terrence looked at me with surprise. "Are you sure, Gideon? I thought you'd never want to part with this house." "I thought so too," I admitted. "But recent events have made me rethink a lot of things. This house is full of memories, good and bad. Maybe it's time to create new memories, in a new place." "And where will you move to?" I looked out the window thoughtfully. "I thought about a little house by the lake. Remember when you and I went fishing there last summer? I like that neighborhood. Quiet, peaceful, nature close by." Terrence nodded. "Good choice. I'll help you find the right one." Over the next month, I slowly recovered physically and rebuilt my life. I met with realtors, looked at house options, and began sorting through my belongings, deciding what to take with me into my new life and what to leave behind. There was no word from Lindell. The police continued their search, but there was no sign of her. Terrence hired a private investigator who suggested that they might have gone to Mexico or even farther away, to Central or South America. I often thought about my grandchildren, how they would adapt to a new life, a new school, a new language. I hoped that Lindell was at least taking proper care of them. One morning, going through the mail, I found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a postcard with a view of some tropical beach and a short note. "We're fine. The kids miss you. L." I sat looking at that postcard for a long time. No apology, no explanation, just a short message to let me know they were alive. I didn't know whether to be thankful for it or even angrier. In late June, I found the perfect house, a small but cozy lakeside cottage about an hour from Chapel Hill, with a spacious porch overlooking the water, a private dock for the boat I planned to buy, and a garden where I could grow tomatoes and other vegetables. The deal with the Bennetts was finalized in mid-July. They paid a fair price, a little below market value, but it was my decision. I wanted a happy family to live in this house. On moving day, as the last boxes were loaded into the truck, I took one last walk through the empty rooms. So many memories, so much life within these walls. Lyndall's birth, her first steps, school holidays, quiet evenings with Eleanor by the fireplace, the last days of my wife's life. In each room, I stopped and said goodbye. To the past, to the pain, to the disappointments. I didn't want to carry that weight into a new life. The last stop was the study. Here, in a small safe behind a bookshelf, was where my new will was kept. Terence had insisted on keeping a copy in the house, in case Lindell ever came back. The will was simple. The lake house and any money left over would go into a trust fund for the grandchildren. Oliver and Isabella would have access to the funds at age 25, old enough that Lyndall and Richard couldn't get their hands on the money. Terence was appointed trustee of the trust, followed by his son, also a lawyer. Lyndall received nothing. It was cruel but fair. She'd already taken what was hers, stealing the money from the sale of the house and car, taking watches and other valuables. I didn't owe her anything more. I closed the safe and took one last look around the office, then resolutely walked out of the house without looking back. Paul was waiting for me in the driveway, ready to drive me to my new home. "Is everything okay?" he asked, seeing the look on my face. "Yeah," I answered, wondering how true that was. "Everything's fine." We drove down the familiar streets of Chapel Hill, past the farmer's market where I'd bought tomatoes, past the park where I'd walked with Eleanor, past the school where Lindell had once attended. The town remained the same, but I was leaving a different person. The drive to the lake took a little over an hour. When we pulled up to my new home, the sun was already beginning to sink, coloring the water golden. The house was small, but bright and cozy. Large windows overlooked the lake, letting in plenty of light. A veranda wrapped around the house on 3 sides, offering beautiful views at any time of day. The furniture I had chosen was simple and functional. Nothing extra, nothing that reminded me of the past. Terence arrived a little later, helping with the final details of the move. When the movers were gone and we were finally alone, he pulled a bottle of good whiskey and 3 glasses out of his briefcase. "To new beginnings," he said, pouring the golden liquid. "To new beginnings," Paul and I echoed, raising our glasses. We sat on the veranda, watching the sunset over the lake, and I felt strangely peaceful. Yes, I had lost my daughter. Yes, I may never see my grandchildren again. Yes, the last few months have been the hardest of my life, but I had survived. I moved on, and for the first time in a long time, I felt not only the bitterness of loss, but hope. "You know," I said, looking out at the darkening water, "Eleanor always said that life doesn't end until you decide it's over." "A wise woman was your Eleanor," Terence nodded. "Yes," I smiled at the memory. "Yes, she was." I thought about the future, the fishing trips on the lake, the new neighbors I'd already met, the books I'd wanted to read for a long time, the trips I'd been putting off. Life wasn't ending. It was just taking on a new form. And in this new form, there was no room for betrayal, for lies, for toxic relationships, only for honesty, friendship, and the peace I'd earned in my declining years. I took a sip of whiskey, feeling the warmth spill over my body, and thought that maybe it was all for the best. Sometimes you have to lose something precious to realize what's really important. And what was important to me now was not the walls of the house, not material possessions, not even family ties if they were based on lies. What was important was honesty, dignity, and the ability to start over, even at 78. I looked out at the lake, at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky, and knew I had made the right decision. My life was not over. It was just beginning anew.